All right, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of These Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and today I'm with two of my favorite people, two people probably that I've spent more time with in the podcast universe than I have anybody else. I have Oleg, Lougheed, Scott Mason. Welcome to the Shadows Podcast again.
Thank you. Thank you for
It's
having
good
us
to
on
be back.
for, I don't know, whatever time this is, but 100th time, something like that.
Well, yeah, Oleg, tell our listeners as of November 19th, our recording date, where you're currently located, because I thought you were back home.
No, I'm at Madeira island off of Portugal. I'm here for another week and a half. And then I'm going to be looking into getting closer to Norway because that's where I want to spend Christmas with a friend of mine and as well as Scott's. And I don't know if you know him, Bodie. Thomas, I'm going to butcher his last name. Scott, do you know where to begin?
Thomas L.
Thomas L.
So he lives in Norway?
He lives in Norway. Yeah, he lives near Oslo. And similar story to what Scott Mason and I experienced. And I guess you and I are still living. And that's, I haven't met him in person just yet.
Yeah.
I've met him through LinkedIn about 2 years ago. And then we've been connected ever since. And so we do a lot of these weekly Zoom conversations where him and I connect, but never met him in person just yet. So that'll be the first time for Christmas of 2021.
I'm picturing a Viking.
Yeah.
This guy sitting right, yeah, like Thor. But
no, he's far from it.
Yeah, I love Norway. That was one of our favorite places. We went kayaking out there, and we went over like there was a Viking ship under where we went through, and then they had like the Viking burial mounds, the above ground ones. It was really cool to see all that. Scott, I know you.
Scott, have you been to Norway?
Absolutely.
I know you're very interested in Vikings, right?
Yep. It's incredible.
Cronin is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so expensive, but it is so worth it.
Yeah, it is. And right, there's a lot to do, but it is like lunch. I think the cheapest lunch that we had was maybe like $125.
No way.
Our McDonald's, we rolled into a McDonald's. We're like, look, we're gonna go value meal here. That value meal was $80.
Yeah.
So
serious?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Why? Is it because the demand is so low? Of people passing through it? Why is it that expensive?
I have no clue. It seems like all the Scandinavian countries are pretty expensive. Sweden was the same way, and
Denmark, absolutely.
Yeah. It's trust me, all four of them were amazing when we were there, but
just a lot of money for food.
Yeah.
For $80, you could buy out a McDonald's in US.
I know. You can go in there and take over, but
and the groceries aren't cheap either, by the way.
Mm-mm.
We tried to get around it that way.
Yeah.
That was futile.
Yeah, but have fun, Oleg.
You've got paid speaking gigs.
I'm sold.
Make sure you keep your margins high.
Yeah. So first thing I want to do, and Scott, you're located beautiful New York City.
New York City, baby. Absolutely.
So which one of these is not like the other? We got New York, we've got Portugal, and then we have Montgomery, Alabama.
Hey,
the third one.
My daddy was from Selma, and I would visit Montgomery all the time when I was a boy.
A lot of history.
Did you really?
Oh, yes, I did. I have photos of Montgomery buses, and there's a civil rights monument or little museum there, and it's very different than New York City, but it's
tons of history.
Yeah, there's a lot that happened there.
Yeah, history.
Wow.
That's about it.
Yeah.
I did watch the movie. I think it's called Selma, right?
Yeah,
Isn't
I think
it?
so, yeah.
I watched it, and I mean, I'm assuming it was pretty accurate when it comes to history. I'm sure there were some parts that were a little bit over dramatized for effect purposes, but yeah, it was pretty eye-opening to be able to see that element of history and what actually took place.
There's a powerful PBS miniseries. It's riveting, called Eyes on the Prize, about the civil rights movement in the South. It's shocking to people who don't know a lot about this history. It's very graphic, but it is really puts the importance of a lot of the events that occurred in places like Selma and Montgomery, as well as other southern cities, into context, and explains exactly why these things have had such massive ramifications in our culture, even to this day.
Wow. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Selma is famous because that's where the big march took place, right? Or is that where it all started? Is that where the march started from?
Oh gosh, you're gonna make me look bad on my own podcast. I believe it started in Selma. Am I right
Okay,
with that,
because I was
Scott?
trying to
I
understand
believe.
what's the
Well,
historical significance.
there
behind it.
were some. So Montgomery was where Rosa Parks was riding the bus and told us to go to the back of the bus.
Yes.
And
Okay.
she got arrested, and that's really what they say triggered the civil rights movement or the official rollout of it. But there were famous marches across a bridge in Selma, and there were also attacks on protesters using things like dogs and these fire hoses that were shown by news cameras around the world. And they really were generators of changes in public opinion about the cruelty of segregation, especially when you see these African American people, they're dressed in suits to the nines. They're so polite, they're so humble, they're so non-aggressive in the face of just brutality. It's hard to fathom.
Yeah. And right down the street from the Rosa Parks bus site, they have Martin Luther King's church, which is really cool.
Oh, okay.
Church, his house, I believe his house got someone attempted to bomb his house. They have so much history. Confederate White House is over there as well. I mean, it's that one little area that has so much history. I would say you'd be hard pressed to find anywhere in the U.S. that has more history than that one street right there in downtown Montgomery. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you're here to go to downtown. And then some of the civil rights museums are just it's hard to walk through them. It really is.
Yeah.
But now, what I want to do before we get into your live podcast that y'all do on Thursdays, which we'll go over the name of that in just a moment, got to put y'all through the 5 rounds presented by Giant Worldwide, official sponsor of the Shadows podcast. Head over to giant.tv/shadows, take one of the free webinars, and then go ahead and become a certified leadership coach while you're over there. Now, first question for the two of you. Favorite city that you have visited? And we'll start with Scott on this one.
Delhi, India.
Really?
I've never experienced anything like it in my life. When I was between career chapters about a decade ago, maybe, or a little bit longer or shorter, I was actually considering moving there permanently for job purposes. I would happily do so in a minute. It's unbelievable.
All right. How about you, Oleg?
For me, it is Coimbra, Portugal. And that's one of the cities that I was able to stop by on the way as I was doing the Camino. What really stood out to me is that it was a combination of both a big city and a small town all in one. And I really saw myself there because I've always imagined living in a place like that. I'm not necessarily a New York City kid by any means. I think it's I love it. I love New York City for what it is, but at times it's a little bit much. And Austin, I think, was
just lost Scott, by the way.
Austin, I think, was very similar to that. And so I like to have my own sense of peace as far as where I choose to live, but also be connected to a bigger city so I can be connected to some of these activities that I truly enjoy doing, like basketball or getting on a bicycle. And Scott Mason and I were able to experience that through New York. How many blocks did we go? At least 200, right?
Probably. And don't worry, Mr. Bodenheimer, you're going to be doing that when you're here.
I'm ready. I was just talking about it the other day. I was saying I'm going there. Well, Oleg, what'd you think of Centra? Centra is like one of my favorite places that nobody talks about.
Centra was cool. I thought it was a little bit too staged. I thought that the city was built, and it probably is still built with the intention to bring in tourism.
Yeah, do the little loop.
For me, there was very little, I guess you could say, authentic life outside of that. There were a lot of castles and things like that you could see. In fact, I don't know, Scott, if you've been there, but it's this town where you can go there. I think it's 30 or 45 minutes from Lisbon.
It's about 45,
direct train ride from there into Sintra. And then at least when I was there, they were doing these deals for all of the buses that would go around the town. You pay 10 euros and you can get on any bus and it will take you to any of the castles. But outside of the castles, I mean, I spent some time at a beach. There's kind of a hidden beach called Costa de Rosa, Coba de Rosa, and that was a beautiful place. But really, outside of that, I didn't see anyone living there or any life outside of tourism. So I thought it was cool for that, but at the same time, I personally don't see myself living there. And that's another big thing that I really don't resonate with as much is cities that do have a lot of tourism,
Yeah.
or that are built around tourism. For me, there's just something about it that doesn't sit in well as far as choosing to live in a city like that. And I'm sure all the big cities have things like that all the time. New York City is a prime example. But for me, when I was visiting Scott, I didn't really feel it, even though I was aware that there is a lot of tourism that's happening. And maybe that's because Scott was able to give me a tour of someone who actually lived there, which was drastically different than what I probably would have experienced by going to the museums and all these other things that New York has to
Person
offer.
grabbing you in Times Square. Hey, you want to hop on this bus?
Yeah.
Get a tour of New York. All right.
Yeah.
Next question for y'all. Let's start with you on this one, Oleg. Biggest fear.
Biggest fear. You would give me the easiest one, wouldn't you? Biggest fear prior to this trip was my fear of travel. I feared travel for many reasons. One of them is I used to have this thought that the world was a scary place. And I was really fortunate to, and I really mean this, to come across Mr. Mason, Thomas, Casey, and Nicole, who really helped me reframe my thinking around that and help me understand that, yes, there are places that I've never been to, and there are certain places that are portrayed one way through the media, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what happens inside of it. So that was my biggest fear of travel. And then some of the other stories related to that were not enough time, too many responsibilities, not enough money, X, Y, and Z. And I would say for the longest time, that was my biggest fear. That's why I didn't choose to pull the trigger for probably many years.
Yeah.
So thank you, Scott Mason, for being a part of that journey.
I'm glad to have been part of it.
Scott, I'm interested to hear, what's your biggest fear?
We've discussed before when I was on your podcast, I believe, the circumstances under which I grew up. And as I believe I mentioned then, expectations for people like me were not very high. Go work in a factory, which there's nothing wrong with, but it was very comfortable and very staid and very conservative in terms of the possibility that that sort of expectation represented for a child. Go work in the shoe store, be an associate at the local department store. All of those sorts of things were the sorts of possibilities that people saw for me. I'll also be candid with you, and it's something I really struggle with, and I think it's important to share the struggle that I have with this with people, because it's something that can be hard to talk about and is very difficult for me to share. But I've got to learn how, and I've got to be able and willing to do that. One of the narratives of my professional life that I've heard a lot about, annoyingly a lot about, is my supposed lack of intellectual capacity. Scott, you're stupid. Scott, you're not that smart. Scott, you can't do this. You just are not of that caliber. Over and over, that's been a theme in a number of different places that I've worked. I share with people, and I think it's important to share the story, although it's dramatic, that I had a boss once tell me in front of my staff and my colleagues, Scott, when you open your mouth and talk, you sound so stupid. You should put a gun in your mouth and shoot. And so why am I telling you all this? Because it goes as to what my biggest fear is. Everyone will be proven right. That the low expectations that the world had for me as a little boy were dead on. That everything that I've done that has been a marker of success, every step of my journey was all just a fluke. But really, I am stupid. I fear failure, not because of what would happen to me, not because of the ego destruction, although let's face it, that ego destruction would kind of suck, but more so proving everyone right, or proving the many people who have not believed in me right, the shame of that. So failure is my biggest fear.
It's funny you said people challenge your or question your intellect, and you went to an Ivy League school. So yeah, I'd hate to see what they think of me, but
well, yeah, that could go as to what really triggers some of these statements when they're being made. But I do think that part of being an empathetic person is wanting to be fair about feedback that I receive. Oh, are they really saying something that I need to pay attention to? And if I'm hearing it over and over again, well, maybe there's something to that. So it's related to another ongoing challenge, which is assessing what is fair and accurate feedback about oneself that you receive from the outside versus what are people just being jerks.
Yeah. Petty about.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. I'm gonna start with Scott on this one. That one song you find stuck in your head all the time.
Oh boy.
You're gonna wish you'd never asked that question.
I got a feeling I do.
So sometimes in life you're faced with these incredible dilemmas. One late night on a Friday when I was a teenager, I couldn't go out or didn't go out. And there were two conflicting shows I like to watch, The Tonight Show and Friday Night Videos, which showed music videos. And at the same time, they were debuting the new song by Irene Cara called Flashdance, What a Feeling, and a new single by Donna Summer called She Works Hard for the Money. And I was torn. How on earth, first of all, Donna Summer and Irene Cara are practically the same. But secondly, how on earth was I supposed to tolerate this as a decision? My mind blew. So I tried to watch Irene Cara for a few minutes, but at the end of the day, Donna Summer pulled me in. And the minute I saw her sing this song, which I'd never heard on the radio before, they just advertised it as a new one by Donna Summer. Oh my God. I drove everyone in my family crazy with that song. I drove everyone crazy in my college dorms with that song. My husband has had that song pounded into his head forever. It's after 9/11, I couldn't listen to music for weeks. What was the first song I put on when I finally dared to listen to music again? Exactly. So the lyrics don't even really speak to me, but although I like them, of course, I mean, anthem for the working women, but that beat, that chorus and her performance and the guitar, the mix between dance and R&B and pop and just everything, the song works. And it's no wonder that it still is a standard to this day. I bet even Oleg knows that song, and he doesn't even know who Donna Summer is.
Can't say that I do.
What's your go-to, Oleg?
Not yet. My go-to is unfortunately not Donna Summer, not yet, but that could change, right? I think my go-to is, and I don't know if the two of you or anyone else that's going to be listening to this knows of this artist. His name is Martin Garrix.
Of course, I love EDM. Absolutely.
Really? I didn't know that. That's awesome. He has a song called "We Are the People," that one of the songs that he was a part of. And I think the reason why it really stands out to me, at least right now, is because that was one of the first songs that I felt really connected to post-pandemic, or I guess you could say halfway through the pandemic. And that is when some of these sporting events were able to resume, in particular soccer. And I remember the Euro Cup at the beginning or the opening of it. They played that song and I watched the whole thing, and I was watched and listened, and I cried at the same time just because of how much compassion I felt towards other people. And if you actually listen to the lyrics, one of the things that they say throughout it is the importance of choosing to find the light within the darkness. And I think that was just a really touching sentence for me, because I know that's something I've experienced during this pandemic, as I'm sure many other people. So that's my go-to now. And I think it helps me. It reminds me that at the end of the day, I believe we're all in this together. We might be traveling different paths and experiencing different set of circumstances, but at the end of the day, we're probably all going through the same thing, just different variations of it.
Okay. Favorite.
That's good to know, though. Sorry, that's good to know, Scott. I didn't know that. Now we share an artist. Now we actually share an artist.
Now I got a
Not
song.
share.
Now I have a song to put on Instagram when I put this on my story. So yeah. The time of this airing is going to be right around the holiday season. What is your favorite holiday movie?
Oh, that's easy. Home Alone.
All right. Well, so
Home Alone.
my respect for you just went up significantly. Home Alone 1 or 2?
I like both. I really like both.
Yeah.
I didn't like, I guess you could say the third or the
We
fourth
don't
one
count
that they
those.
did
Those
when they
are
switched the characters. Yeah.
Those are a wash.
First and second ones. In fact, I'll tell you the story. Ever since I was 13 or 14, maybe 15 years old, that is the one movie I would watch from one time to another.
Yeah.
Literally, my ideal version of a Christmas is spent decorating the Christmas tree, opening the presents, and then from there watching Home Alone with a bowl of popcorn or cookies.
You gotta
or
have the
whatever it
nasty
is.
ice cream, like
Gotta have all of that. And I think
Yeah.
the reason why it's my favorite is because when I was a little kid, that is the one thing I wanted to do, is I wanted to be
Just
home
be
alone. Exactly. So I can experience some of these things. It was, I don't know how it was for you, Bodie, but whenever I first saw that movie, I was like, I want to be this kid. I want to know what it would be like to get lost in New York City while your family is in Miami or Orlando.
Well,
in Florida,
I think they
right?
went to Paris the first one, then they went to
Paris,
Miami the
and
second one.
And so I've always wanted to do it. And if my parents listen to this, well, let it be. But when I was younger, I was left home alone for a couple days, and it's a decision that I don't think they might be proud of for letting me do that. But yeah.
One of my guests, Jamie Andrews, who I'm not gonna lie to you, she was one of my favorite people that I've talked to since the podcast got started. And any of the previous guests listening to this, I'm sorry, she was just one of my favorite people.
Makes me feel good.
She's up there with the two of y'all, though. She's in my top 3, but she's never watched Home Alone.
No way.
I can relate. I can't sit through that thing.
That's a classic.
All right, Oleg, this is just gonna be me and you from here on out. Look, my daughter and I can quote. We quote starting around October. We start quoting Home Alone, and we even quote like the filthy animal part. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could go on. We're gonna have a whole episode about this. Scott, now that you've bashed Home Alone, what is your favorite holiday movie?
What do you think? Gremlins.
Huh.
See, and I agree with you. It's a Christmas movie.
That's a good one too.
It is.
I like
People
that.
say it's not, and even behind. Look at that behind me.
Absolutely. I love it. I think it is a brilliant Christmas movie. I mean, come on. The story about Santa Claus in that.
Yeah. Are you talking about Phoebe Cates?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, when we first watched it, I forgot that scene was in there, and Becton was watching the movie, and Phoebe Cates started talking. And I was like, "Oh, Becton, real quick, can you go grab me something?" So every year I would send her away during that scene. Yeah, but we watched Gremlins 2 last night.
That was pretty good. I don't feel it was quite as strong or viscerally thrilling as the original one. However, I felt there were
New York.
Yes, and as a matter of commentary on film, right? Like it broke the fourth wall that I thought was in a way that I thought was really creative and had a sort of a meta element to it. So it gets big points for creativity.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Your respect went back up.
Mr. Grinch for any of you?
No, I'm probably a Home Alone or underrated one. Scrooge, Bill Murray.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's actually a good one.
So here's some dope ass stuff about Scrooge. Why I like that? Because, well, yes, but what's most important is the woman who played Eveline, the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wiz, was in that too. That woman could sing.
Mm-hmm.
And she played Mama on What's Happening in the 70s. Her name was Mabel King. And the fact that they cast her in that role and they had her singing at the very end made that movie a masterpiece. Eveline, The Wiz, that's another favorite holiday movie. I should have mentioned that. I loved it when the Wicked Witch got flushed down the toilet.
I loved it. I love the end of Scrooge every year.
What a
Yeah. What is it, little man? God
Exactly.
bless everyone. So good. All right.
If anyone's ever looking for a review of the movie, they know what to go to. Mr. Scott Mason.
I think I've lost count.
He'll tell you all the behind
wrong.
the scenes too.
So I think I've lost count of what questions. I think we're on our fourth. We'll go with another one. Favorite color.
I'll answer that. I will say blinding white/yellow. Once I was approached by someone who claimed to have the ability to read auras. So, of course, I had to ask her, well, what color is my aura? And she said it was whitish yellow. I don't know what that means, but in any event, okay. And then number 2, my personal avatar. I tell people this. I think Oleg has heard this to death. I can't stand it when people are always asking for animal avatars. Who is your spirit animal?
Scratch my next question.
Oh, well, yeah, good. I'm not an animal. I don't model myself after animals. I model myself after the gods. And my divine avatar is the sun god, Helios, Sol Invictus, the unconquerable sun. And what is he? A blinding, radiant white yellow. That's my favorite color.
Scott, I thought you were Zeus. Okay.
Zeus, yeah, that's too played out. We've got to be a little bit more original than that.
Yep.
No one's allowed to use that as their avatar.
Oleg, what about you?
I think for me, I was going to say green, but at the same time, I almost can't say yellow because that's the color of the t-shirt. So that would go, completely against our sponsor and everything. But no, I would say green. I truly enjoy green. And I think actually someone had told me in whatever conversation that when they were able to see my aura, it did have elements of green in that. I personally can't read them. I don't even know what they look like. So I don't know what to look for to begin with, but green is something that speaks strongly to me.
Okay. Well, congratulations. Y'all survived our 5 rounds presented by Giant Worldwide, official sponsor of the Shadows podcast.
Oh, glad. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm stressful.
That's a wrap now. It's funny because when we started it, we were like, oh, this is going to be really nice to like ease people into it. People get stressed over these questions. They don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
But all right.
Well, it makes me think of a time when I was in middle school or high school and I was being put on the spot to read out loud in front of the whole class.
Yeah, or like the spelling test.
Every single word. Yeah, or the spelling test. Oh boy, there's still one that haunts me to this day. I spelled teacher, and I swear I spelled teacher right on a giant whiteboard in my 5th and 6th grade classroom. And I remember the teacher walking into our class and she said, "Who wrote this on the board?" And obviously I didn't raise my hand because I thought that there was something wrong with it. And I think she said something along the lines of that it was misspelled. But still, to this day, I feel like I spelled it right. And from that point on, whenever situations like this come up, where there are rapid questions or things like that, it just goes back to those memories.
Okay, so I'm doing my job here, bringing up some emotions. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to let our listeners know that if they have not, they need to check out your Facebook and LinkedIn live stream every Thursday night. And it is, and what's the time for it on Eastern? Eastern at 7 to 9?
7:15 to approximately 8:30 to 8:45, depending on how the conversation is going.
I was about to give them Central Standard Time, but it's called, are you all ready?
Just a
squirrel
looking for a nut, trying to get out of this rut.
That was awful. We did.
Well, one of our
blame me.
co-hosts who joined us in reading this just now, I felt actually did a pretty doggone good job.
Oh, I didn't have the
Yeah.
words this time to usually I have
Exactly.
the words on the screen,
Yeah,
so
we need a little bit of guidance and direction.
Stronger than you think you are, brother.
looking bad on my own show. Now tell our listeners, first of all, how did the two of you cross paths?
I'll start this little story. So I have a friend who is a book publisher, and she had a Christmas party, since we're talking about holidays. And I went to that Christmas party and just was randomly talking to people. And one of the other attendees there was a woman named Leah Frankel. And Leah Frankel works with people who are transitioning into retirement. She's a genuinely loving person, and she was trying to get her name out there. She was in the process of writing a book, and she was also looking to learn about podcasts and possibly be on podcasts. And so she and I did a special event together on Zoom right after the pandemic happened. And we've kept in touch. But in the meantime, as she was meeting potential podcast hosts or people that could school her about podcasts, she was turning them my way because she knew that I wanted to be a guest on them as well. And so she called me up and said she had a couple of people that she wanted me to meet. And one of them was this person who she said was this extraordinary young man. Scott, I won't say any more about him. You just have to meet him. But he's really a special one. And through that introduction, I met Oleg. Oleg, take it away.
And then Scott and I had a 3-hour phone call. Was it that long? Might have been longer.
It was very, very, very long.
It was very long. We had a 3-hour phone call. And one thing that really stood out to me from that phone call was Scott was probably one of the only people besides Lachelle that I've ever met in my life who actually took notes.
I did.
During the conversation. And I remember, he would walk away with a whole notepad full of notes. And then towards the end of that phone call, I don't remember who it was that proposed the idea. It might have been me that I said, hey, I would love for us to find some way to stay in touch or to collaborate on whatever frequency, weekly, monthly. And I think we started with just calls, right?
Yeah.
We started just with calls. And then within a couple weeks after that call, I had come across an ad from this guy. His name is Otto Dumans, I believe. And he had this very creative ad posted on LinkedIn where the picture of it was a squirrel. And underneath the squirrel was about a paragraph or so describing his situation. And so for him, he had lost his job due to COVID. And so he was in need of some help and some guidance. And a friend of mine, or a friend of ours, Nicole Ash, sent me this picture and she said, hey, you need to check this out. It's a brilliant piece of advertising. So I looked at it, and within probably a couple minutes, I called Nicole and I said, how do I get in touch with this person? So I reached back out to him, and then was able to get on the phone for 40 to 45 minutes. And during that time, I kept telling him, I said, hey, I want to help you in whatever way that I can, because I just felt so touched by the intentional ad he put together. It truly was something I've never seen in my life. And then right after that, I thought of this idea. I thought of an idea or a project that Scott and I could collaborate around. And it was this concept of just a squirrel looking for a nut, trying to get out of this rut, which in a way that was the mission to help Otto to find a job, and he was able to find a job through Nicole's help later on. But at the same time, it also gave birth to a project that Scott and I have been able to collaborate for the past year.
Over a year.
Maybe even over a year.
Significantly longer than a year, I would say.
And so
it's been pre-COVID or post-COVID?
This was maybe
during
a month
COVID.
Or so into COVID, right?
Yeah, we began talking about it quite quickly after we got to know each other. Not immediately, but after I had appeared on his podcast. I was actually in conversation at the time with a production company to begin my own podcast. And we felt that might take however long, and it was going to be a solo show. Live streaming was truly emerging as a new viable form of mass communication with people. We wanted to make sure that we were leveraging that and we could learn it and practice it in a place that was safe, as well as play off of the unique combination of things about us that are both different and similar.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but both you and I wanted to do is we wanted to create a community of other people who were similar enough to our journeys and the different quote unquote rut situations that we were experiencing. And I think that's really become the beauty of it all, at least for me, is through this space. I've met so many people who, as Scott had mentioned, were similar, but also different in so many different ways, and was able to connect with them that I don't think I would have been able to meet had it not been for the show or the space. And Bodhi, you've been on it multiple times by now. I think the thing that I still truly appreciate, but maybe having a harder time understanding how it works, is how people choose to engage. There are some people that literally have come almost every week since we started and have shared their insights and perspectives on different topics. And I think that's another thing that makes that space unique, is the fact that we can be so open and accepting of each other, while understanding that we all have our different perspectives. And for those that choose to tune into yesterday's show, I won't repeat what Scott said on the show, but sometimes we think we know certain things, and other times we'll just ask questions, and it's beautiful to be able to share that openly in a space that is public to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really stands out to me about this pairing of you two is y'all balance each other out very well, and it's just like a match made in podcast heaven with the two of you. Because sometimes you get personalities that are way too similar. Caleb Pearson, I know he's probably listening to this. I love Caleb Pearson, but we always talk about it. We're cut from the same cloth. We're a lot like each other. But no, I like the way y'all balance each other out very well in the show. And then, like you mentioned, Oleg, the commentary that's provided by the listeners that are able to.
It's truly one of a kind.
It's awesome, and they're loyal. They come back
week
after week, and it's some very entertaining topics that y'all bring up. And usually I'll have like a theme very similar to what we do with. In fact, we kind of ripped it off from Just a Squirrel, but we do it with Off the Air. How do y'all come up with the topics for your shows?
Twofold. First of all, we both have our own brands and our own general areas of interest that, while occasionally overlap, they're not identical. And so, to the extent that there are things that we, on our own journeys, are attempting to delve into more deeply to have better understanding for those that we might be speaking in front of or podcasting for or otherwise working with, these questions are a way for us to leverage the podcast format, as well as each other's intellect and the thinking of the audience, to be able to refine ideas, to be able to see where our thinking might be weak, and to see by saying things outside of our heads, to the extent to which our ideas are even viable or make sense or can be thought through and implemented in a way that is substantive and that answers all of the questions underneath the questions. So that's number one. And then number two, observationally, we all are living lives that may not seem it in any particular moment, but are eventful. And in fact, some of the most eventful things, or at least the things that are of most interest to people, are things that are the most mundane. And so some of our topics have just been about simple little things that happen, but really can generate a lot of questions. We had one about hairstyle, and that got a lot of that got a lot of engagement and a lot of passionate engagement, because although there might not be anything particularly exciting about hairstyles to people that pretend to be of elevated intellectual or developmental stature, it actually is something that impacts everybody, even if they don't have hair.
I was going to say,
and sometimes, especially if they're a female and they don't have hair, and people have passionate feelings about. So we have, by attuning ourselves to the day-to-day quirkinesses or assumptions that people take for granted about how life operates, found rich fields from which the seeds of discussion can grow into some pretty tall plants.
And to build off of what Scott just shared, I think the other reason why it works so well and how we've been able to come up with many of these topics is I personally follow, I have a model that I follow, or at least I have been following for the past 3 to 4 years. And that's when I was first starting Overcoming Odds. One of the things that I truly committed to from day one is I chose to become the client of my own work. I stopped looking at the external world as far as these are the things other people need. And I started to look internally and say, what are the things that I would need? What are the things that I would like to know more about? And the reason why I did that is because in thinking back about my past, one of the things or one of the fears that I experienced, going back to one of your earlier rapid fire questions, was when I was in school, for many years, I refused to ask questions. I refused to ask questions in class because I thought that the things that I wanted to know were not the things that other people wanted to know. And so it prevented me from asking any type of questions. And then in ninth grade, my ninth grade teacher stood up in the middle of class and she said, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And from that point forward, it broke this lid that was preventing me from my own individual path of discovery and knowledge and education. And I think that's another reason why this show is able to work so well, is at least personally speaking from my lens, I really trying to understand what are the things that I would like to know more about. What is a question that is left unanswered for me? And I think, Scott, you take a similar approach, but I don't want to speak for you. I think there's a lot of similarities between how you and I choose to approach these topics and why they resonate so much with other people. Because at the end of the day, I guess what I'm learning is that we're very similar. Yeah, I mean, yes, we might go to the bathroom in different ways, and I don't know if this is the direction you wanted to take the show in, but at the same time, we probably have similar experiences when it comes to a lot of this.
Yeah, I've actually seen how y'all, I mean, sometimes we'll finish and we'll be off the air and we'll just start talking about something.
Yeah.
And then it's like, ooh, that'd be a good thing to talk about. And then like a week or two later, I see it pop up as like the topic for the show. And you're right. Y'all can take something as simple, a simple topic, like one word, and build off of it into, you know, an hour and a half episode. And it gets really deep. And that's one thing I really like about it. So I definitely encourage listeners out there to go check it out. Very relatable topics. But my next question is kind of something you said, Oleg, sparked something with me. For each of you, what's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself while doing these live streams on Just a Squirrel?
I would say for me, the first thing that comes to mind is the importance of continuing to put myself out there, to continue to reaffirm myself that everyone has an opinion. And many times people will give you an opinion, whether you ask for it or not. And I know that in thinking about my own story, there were so many chapters within my life where I was so concerned with what other people thought of me, where my reality became their opinions. So whether it was things that I should be doing in life, the careers that I chose to build, even the podcasting world, starting a nonprofit, every single one of those are not the traditional paths that I think many people take in life. And I know doing these live shows, it helped me develop confidence and courage. And more importantly, I think it also helped me find my own community of other people who share similar passions for life. Other people who are, whether it's professional speakers, people who have started nonprofits, or people who have done something that is considered to be not the traditional path. And I think through these shows, I've been able to find other people who I truly can call my friends. I've been able to find people who I can almost call family to a degree. And I think that's the most beautiful part of it all, is this show helped me reaffirm that family is a choice. And the fact that I'm choosing to be in touch with many of these people. That's the most important part to me. So it really expanded my circle, and it gave me things that I was desperately looking for many years, but didn't know how to find them or where to look. And I think this space has been one of those.
Two things come to mind on my end. First of all, when you're live, and I'm sure anyone who has a role in life that requires regular performance, during that time, you have to be focused on what's going on. You can't sit around and be distracted by a fly buzzing around your hair, or that food that's just out of the corner of your eye, or email, or someone's post on Instagram or Quora or some other platform. And focus, as anyone who's ever done the martial arts in particular would know, and I would imagine those in the military like you are very aware of, Trip, is that you have to, it's something that has to be practiced in order to be successfully executed. And focus is all the more paramount when you're giving, especially when the people are there only because they want to receive what you have to give. And so I might be tired. I might have had a bad day. There might have been a whole bunch of things going on in my life. And 7:15 Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday of a week, Thursday is towards the end of the week. So what that means is that the tiredness has accumulated, the lateness of the night has accumulated, and whatever things have come up through the week have accumulated. But at 7:15 Eastern Standard Time, I need to be there. I need to have the microphone on, the camera going. I need to have stuffed whatever's bothering me back into the base of my skull, have taken a deep breath, and shine for that audience. It's amazing power that we have to turn on and off our emotions and to bring our full selves to the table if we practice it and understand that's what's going on. I might have just gotten into a fight with my husband, but right before I come on, I have to take a deep breath and be the squirrel that my audience wants me to be and is there for. I need to deliver for them. What a profound gift, because ultimately that sort of self-discipline, that understanding of what we are capable of being able to pull on a persona and really sincerely have that persona be something for other people, with practice, that becomes a superpower. And it's one I'm very glad to have. Finally, remembering and practicing again that the audience is always paramount. As you know, in live stream podcasting, Trip, because you're a regular co-host of the show at this point, in order to keep an audience there, in order to make them feel like they're part of that community that Oleg just talked about, you need to engage with them. It can't just be your agenda and you talking back and forth as if you're in a bubble, or it can be just no one's going to pay attention and your show will just be existing for absolutely no one. Bringing the audience in, making them feel involved, making sure that they feel heard. When you do that, you can sense the excitement. They send back their response to your question to them. They feel as though they're part of a family. And this show emerged during a time in history when people needed families. We still need families. And I say until people want to vomit, but I'll say it again, that the pandemic may be getting better soon, but anyone who thinks that this is the last time we're going to be facing crises and going to be needing families, anyone who thinks that that ain't happening again and it's all going to go back to the way it was, we're not going to have any more problems, yeah, they're wrong. So we as leaders need to be there for them, creating that family. That's an amazing gift to have been given through this experience.
Yeah, I love what the two of you said. Oleg started talking about the family piece, and you're right. It's like the connections we've made on here I mean, look, I'm even growing my beard like Scott.
Yeah.
So
And I'm shaving just like you.
don't do it. You got a nice head of lettuce. Don't do it. But then what you were saying as well, Scott, is something that I've constantly told. It's something we teach at our course down here is regardless of what is going on in your life, when it's time to perform, you go in there and you put on that mask and you go in there, you owe it to them. And, I said a musician doesn't go up on stage and go like, hey, I'm just letting y'all know I'm having a really rough day. I'm going through. You owe it to that 20,000 folks that have bought tickets to perform. And same thing when people are tuning in to listen to these. You got to be what they're expecting when they tune into it. So I think it was very valid points, which y'all said there. Next question I want to talk about. Y'all have an amazing sponsor over at your podcast, doing some amazing things. If you could, and I see one of those shirts that Oleg's rocking right there. If you could, let our audience know about your sponsor over at Just a Squirrel, looking for a nut.
I'll show the shirt, and Scott, if you want to take over the.
Exactly. The youthful, good-looking member of the team should be modeling the shirt. Those of us who are relegated to the other roles will be happy to share about Spectrum Design Foundation, that is our sponsor. Spectrum Design Foundation is a nonprofit that is actually a t-shirt and apparel printing company. They also embroider baseball hats and polos and hoodies and things like that. Basically, any apparel decoration that you need done and customized to your company or your nonprofit or your government organization or any other organization or your personal needs, they can and will do. What makes them different from every other t-shirt and apparel printer in the entire world is that they hire almost exclusively people that are on the autistic spectrum. Now, as the founder of this company, the great Patrick Bardsley says, the unemployment rate amongst those on the autistic spectrum approaches 90%. And many of those that are on that spectrum who do get jobs that are highly menial or that are not necessarily career path jobs. What Spectrum Designs does is provide them with real, concrete, career type jobs that have meaning, while at the same time providing the customer with pricing and quality of service and ultimate product that is equal to any entity out there. By the way, I've gone on shop tours of this remarkable organization. When you walk into their space and you see how ecstatic everyone is to be working there, how much attention and care they put into the details of the hats that you might be having embroidered, or that little tiny speck on the back of your t-shirt that is important to you but no one else might notice. It's genuinely inspiring. Spectrum Design Foundation, a great company with a good cause.
Yeah, that's a sharp looking shirt that Oleg is wearing. I'm not gonna lie. I've seen
It's
pictures of them with.
It's a really nice design and the material. Well, speaking of design, there's a person that both Scott and I know. His name is Richard Reimer. I believe that's the correct pronunciation of the last name. He helped us actually create this. And one thing that I'll say about him is I know that Scott and I spent some time and got him over some files as far as what we felt the brand represented and what the message we wanted to communicate. But this was I think it was the first draft.
Yeah, he knocked it out of the park.
It was incredible. Like how, even with the logo for the show, the fact that it looks like a nut, but then at the same time, it looks like a squirrel. I was blown away by his design skills and what he's been able to create.
Yeah, I can respect a good logo and good cover. That's my realm. And I do all the stuff for the shadows. And yeah, I love the look, the theme, everything that y'all have going on with it. One more time before we get into your individual podcast. One more time. Listeners are glued. They're going to tune in next Thursday. What time and where can they find you?
7:15 Eastern time. And they can find us through Facebook and LinkedIn Live. So if they either can find us through individual profiles, either type my name or Scott's name into the search bar, or just simply find our pages, just a squirrel looking for a nut, on either of the platforms.
Yeah, Facebook page is really good with a very detailed description of,
Yeah.
kind of leading you, build. It's almost like a movie trailer. This is
Yeah.
what we're going to be going over today. And then, yeah, we dive right into it right when it starts off. And now, if you could, Scott, we'll start with you. Let our listeners know about what you're doing in the podcast world individually.
Thank you so much. I host a podcast named Scott Mason's Purpose Highway, purposehighway.com. It's on its second season, although next year we're going to start a third season that I'm very excited about. The current season is discussing two things: a silent revolution of thinking around purpose, ethics, and spirituality that is occurring as the spaces that have historically connected people in the search for that sort of meaning have been in decline. And by that, I mean specifically a lot of the organizational associations that have guided people in their search for meaning, organized religions, as well as large-scale legacy civic associations. Now, with the decline of those sorts of organizations, people are coming up with creative, innovative, and truly, in some cases, radical ways of rethinking what ethics mean, or ethics means, how you can find your purpose, and how you can be in touch with and grow your spirituality. It is a new world. Our show asks, are you ready for it?
And Scott, where can they find your podcast at?
purposehighway.com.
Now, I'm not sure if you say no, I'll just edit this out. Any spoilers for season 3?
I'm glad you asked. I am very excited to reshift the focus of the show a little bit into the personal transformation space. I believe that if all of us are willing to look at the personal mythology that's toxic, that has defined who we are, what we expect of ourselves, and then rewrite new epics for our future, amazing things are possible. You can unleash your inner charisma, bring your purpose into the world, and find deeper connection to yourself and to others. The lens through which we will be exploring this topic is Greek mythology, and I will be talking to some people who may or may not be on this program about Greek mythology as a metaphor for their own personal change and transformation, and what those 6,000-year-old stories have to teach all of us about the possibilities for the sagas that we can write about our own lives as heroes and perhaps even Olympians.
I love the concept. I've talked to you several times about it. I love the concept. I love the direction you're going with it. So I can't wait for season 3. And yeah, you may have some pretty special guests on there.
We are definitely are.
All right, Oleg, what about you?
For me, people can find everything that I do and everything that I'm about through a nonprofit called Overcoming Odds, which also has a podcast and also has some tremendous people behind it, including Scott Mason, who has been involved within this for probably closer to a year. I think
Absolutely.
what we do. So what this is, for anyone who hasn't heard this, is a space for people to be, in simple words, to be appreciated, to be heard, and to be valued for who they are. It is also an opportunity for people to develop their own path, their own personal narrative around whatever the challenges that they might face in their lives. And I know that this is something we try and strive for, is believing in this concept that at the end of the day, at least those that are part of this mission, share the goal that we believe that one of the more basic needs, or one of the most basic needs amongst many others that people have, is a story and the narrative that they believe in and they like. And that's, I know, is something that we consciously try and create, is opportunities to further explore whatever the stories people choose to believe in, and in cases that they're looking for change, help them redefine that just through simple curiosity and questioning, and creating a space where they can be understood and accepted for who they are, and nothing more. And I know that we excel in all of that solely because the people behind all of this are exactly those individuals who accept each other regardless of the circumstances. So where can they find it? It is at overcomingodds.today.
Yeah, you both are doing amazing stuff, and definitely you've been doing it for quite some time. Yeah, I've definitely have broken the, podcasts don't make it past 8 episodes. I've been around for a while. And
as have you, by the way.
Yeah, but you two were two of the ones that when Shadows podcast got started, you were two along with Llama Lounge that really kind of helped me get a direction of where I wanted to go, and kept me going, because I'm like, these are great connections right here, because y'all were on my earlier episodes too. So I connected with y'all. I was very fortunate to connect with y'all early from the get-go. But yeah, folks, go check out both of their shows. And then definitely want to check in every Thursday night and make sure that you are checking out Just a Squirrel Looking for a Nut. It's awesome. It's fun. I have fun on there. Sometimes I come in and I'm like, I do not know how I'm going to be able to hold my own with these two. But it's fun. It's just the chemistry amongst everybody on the show, and even Casey Berman and all these other guests that you have on there. Remarkable people, super smart, very detailed conversations that we have on there. So folks, we're going to have the links for all of these podcasts. This is almost like that book, your Amazon cart of book list right now, with all these podcasts people need to go listen to. And it's around the holiday season, so you got plenty of time. You're probably sitting around tired of Hallmark movies anyways. So final comments for our listeners. What final comments do y'all have?
The beauty of podcasting and listening to podcasts is that the barriers between the audience and those who seek to have their voices heard in the world has been removed. The gatekeepers, traditional media, that were monitoring who could say what in a way that could be heard by whoever they were choosing to target their content to, our world, our corner of the universe is shattered. It's about time. Be part of the information revolution. Be part of the revolution of voices that used to just be a trickle in the background, being a tide that floods continents. That's my final word for the day.
As challenging as this time might be, one thing that I'll say is podcasting has made it, for me, easier and more accessible to access information that may or may not have been there before. And I think having the opportunity to listen to so many different shows, what it's done for me is that created possibilities for me to see that the future can be different. That despite of the challenges and whatever circumstances I might be experiencing right now, simply by tuning into someone else's story and listening to their perspective, what it's done for me is that it created opportunities for me to shift my own perspectives. So I think in knowing what I know now and having done this form of conversations and interviews, whichever way you want to call it, it's something that I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. And I think being connected to the two of you as well, it continues to give me inspiration that even in the most difficult circumstances, it's still possible to find other people who are like-minded, and podcasting is that form. It's so much more than being able to read to an article. There's truly something behind being able to hear someone else's voice and someone else's story and really connect with them, even though I may or may not have ever met them in person. And I know that I can say that about Scott's show, and I can say the same thing about your show, Bodhi, that the two of you do this exceptionally well. You really connect with people and you care and you accept them as who they are. And at the end of the day, for me, those are the most important things that I look for in any single interaction.
Well, definitely all the comments you just made holds true for you as well. And I want to thank both of you for, and this was like one of the quickest turnarounds I've ever had. I think I just mentioned this to you all yesterday, and you both hopped on here and we made this happen. And then Oleg, you're the first guest I've had outside of the US, not including Canada. I've had two
Yeah.
amazing Canadians on my show, but to have you all the way from over in Europe, pretty cool. We're very popular. The Shadows are. We are the David Hasselhoff of podcasting.
I
Very
love it.
popular in Europe. So it's only fitting that we did this. But thank y'all so much for joining us, folks. This is our last Shadows podcast episode of 2021. So I want to thank all of y'all for being a loyal, faithful audience. We have some incredible stuff coming your way in 2022. Check us out, theshadowspodcast.com.